Welcome back. In this video, we're going to set up our view model class. So therefore, we are going to set or say that a class is going to be of a certain type. Now, that is basically what inheritance is all about. So we're going to look at inheritance in a separate video also. But for now, let's stay with our example and see how we can make sure that our code and classes are organized for specific roles that they fulfill. Okay, so because so far we just had this one class, the main activity KT file, which took care of everything. Now we can separate that very cleanly by using a view model. So let's go ahead and create a new file in here, new Kotlin file class, and I'm going to call this one counter view model. So you just have this view model in the name of your class, and then whatever else the class is about. So this class is about counting, and well, it's basically the manager between the view and the model. So it's going to be the counter view model class. So let's go ahead and create that. Now, if we look at our main activity and we go all the way up here, we can see that our main activity is inheriting from component activity. Now we will look at what inheritance is in the next video, but it's just still important to see that here, because we're basically saying main activity should behave like a component activity. And by doing so, we suddenly have these things like override, fun on create, we have super on create. Otherwise we wouldn't have that. So basically these are predefined things or like code pieces that just say, hey, this is what you have to do if you want to use me, so to speak. So now our counter view model will be of type view model. So there is this class called view model, and I'm just gonna say that our class should use or be of that type view model. So this view model class here predefines how a view model is supposed to behave, what kind of things a view model is supposed to do, what kind of methods it has that it can use, and some properties that are predefined as well. Before we go into more about inheritance, and that's what we're going to do in the next video, let's have a quick look at also what has been imported for us. So you can see import lifecycle view model has been added for us. Okay, so it's inside of Android X, and we can now go ahead and use that inside of our program. Now, if we look at our view model class, what are the things that we need to have? Well, number one is going to be, we need to have a variable that stores the count. Now we're going to use a mutable state to hold the count data. So we have seen mutable states before, but this time we're not going to use remember. We're going to use, first of all, the private keyword, val count, and whenever you make a variable private, which means this variable is only going to exist inside of our class or is only accessible from inside of our class and cannot be accessed from outside of our class, then it is common practice to add the underscore to that variable so that you can directly see, okay, this is a private variable, and that's what this underscore is for. And then I'm going to say this will be mutable state of, and it doesn't offer me mutable state for quite a bit, so I'm going to write it out, mutable state of, and then I'm going to say it's going to be of types, or it's a 0, so it's going to be of type int. So now let's import mutable state of, and you can see it has been added here to our imports at the top. Now the next thing is our count variable, as I said, is now private. So we can only access it from inside of this view model, and that is a good practice, right? But if we want to expose it to outside, so if somebody wants to access the counter variable, so for example, our user interface wants to access the counter variable to know what the variable is at the current state, we need to expose the count as an immutable state. So how can we do that? We can do that by using val count and then mutable state of type int and we need to import mutable state here and say that it should be whatever count at that point is going to be. Okay, so now we can not change the value of count from outside because it's of type val. So it's set once and that's what the value is going to be. But as it is a state, it's going to still be quite flexible. So whatever count is, that's what our count, that exposed variable that we can access from outside, is going to be as well. And now in here is where we want to have the logic about how calculations are done. Okay, so here this increment and decrement, I'm just going to copy them out from the other function. I'm going to put, or like from the other file, and I'm going to put them here. But now I'm not editing the exposed count variable, but I'm editing this count variable. So this underscore count, that's the one that I want to modify the value of whenever we're incrementing or decrementing. So we're basically only modifying the variable that we have privately, but then the one that can access it from outside, we basically store it in there. So you do that because then you can modify what should happen when somebody tries to access it. So you can give a lot more instructions as to what happens. So in this case, it would seem a little arbitrary. Why would you do that, right? But it's just a way of ensuring that your internal variable, the private variable, is not exposed to the outside. Only its value is exposed, not the variable itself. All right, and how do we now manage our main activity? So we can get rid of the logic from our main activity counter app. And now we need to pass our counter view model in here. So I'm going to pass a view model of type counter view model. And now we can use the view model in order to modify, for example, what we display. So instead of displaying count value, and we can also get rid of this count variable, by the way, we only have the column in there. We don't have the count value. However, we have the view model.count.value. So view model dot, and I have the L, I forgot the L, view model.count.value. And now the same goes for our increment. So we need to use view model.increment and view model.decrement. So now by doing so, we are using the functions from here. We're using this function as well as this function, and we are accessing this variable instead of the private variable and modifying it accordingly. Now, however, when we go to our main activities on create function, we can see that counter app now needs a view model that we can pass to it. So where do we get this view model from? Well, inside of our set content, there we set a view model object up. So we're going to say counter view model, and this will just be a view model object, like so. And now in order to use this view model, we need to add the dependency here. So you can hover over it and you can see add dependency on Android X lifecycle view model compose. So let's import this here, and then it will take a little while until the import is done, and you will see that we have now this import where we have Android X lifecycle view model compose view model. And now we can pass this view model to our counter app. So to our composable that needed a view model data type object whenever we want to run it. And we want to run it right here, or display it in our case. Now let's rerun our application and just see whether our variable is going to be stored or not. Because that's what this whole thing was about. Not only, but that was one of the important aspects why we set it up this way. And there we are. So I had to restart my computer for it to run. But anyways, now we have our little application again. Now the MVVM variant, right? So the optimized variant, so to speak. Let's increment a little bit. And then let's turn around our phone, and we can see, even though it did refresh the user interface, basically rebuilding everything, but our state has maintained, and now our number 5 is still there. So What you could probably just take away from this video is that MVVM helps you to maintain the state better. But as soon as we get to the M part, so to the data part of MVVM, it will make more sense. What we currently only have is really the VVM. So you could say that this is our M, our model, even though it's not really. So the model is a separate class that we need to set up as well. But then we have the view, which would be then we have the view, which is our main activity, which takes care of the view. So basically what we can see on the screen. And then we have our view model that manages the communication between the data and the UI. All right, so that's it for this video. See you in the next one.